So, just we were previously talking about the nature of the first of the Four Noble Truths, truths of suffering. Yesterday afternoon was devoted to the second truth, truth of origination. And these two, this pair of truths is referred to as the truths that explain how the process of samsara is set in motion. So the order then, why is the order the way it is? If the cause is the mental afflictions and karma and the result is suffering, then one, in terms of the relationship, which comes first, the cause would come first. But the order is the reverse of that. The first suffering is taught, and that's followed by the cause. So there are discussions about the importance of the order. And the main reason that's given is that the attitude, the principal attitude in relation to the Four Noble Truths is to develop the aspiration to seek the third Noble Truth, which is the cessation of samsaric suffering by eradicating its cause. But in order to develop that aspiration, it's essential that you first contemplate the nature of samsaric existence so that you will develop the determination to free yourself from it by recognizing it as being undesirable or unsatisfactory. And that is mainly accomplished by meditating on the first of the four truths, the truth of suffering. So that's the main reason that it's presented first. So there are various instructions about meditating on the 8 kinds of suffering as a set of topics to meditate on, or the 6 kinds of suffering as a second set, the 3 kinds of suffering, the various explanations and instructions to cultivate in relation to understanding properly what the truth of suffering means. So that alone will generate the intention or the desire or the wish to not continue to be subject to that suffering or unsatisfactoriness. So then that prompts you to think, well, what does this come from? How was this condition created? Does it have a cause? And so then that leads to the second noble truth, which is mainly to recognize the manner in which the karma and the mental afflictions are responsible for experiencing the condition of samsaric suffering. Then those two together are described as the subject matter by which the process of samsara is set in motion, mainly by the mental afflictions, and then because of those causes, one is forced to experience the result of samsaric suffering.
Nani sheja nagi juni pamjala says to her, what it is. Amji then tangu net jejuva. That it neti tambu shared it. Tambu neti. Neti want to do in the neti. Neti kari chun, neti kende kari le teni chuni meta uva. Neni sheja, neni juni panja la sita tine, ani neni judi tse suna, neni judi chedu, judi, ani goyavi chedu, ani meti uva, neni sheja neni juni panja las. That in Tuja said the Dorania Bati Tujari. Mentini, name Yabati Tujari Triva, name Yabati Tingo Ding Chiti. Nani she the Tene Tuja. Nani she's a native juni panja, Tene Tuja. Ani Nani she's a native juni panja, Tene Tuja. Many temple Java this Sierra. 다음에는 때문에 매디 가르스는 다 남대디 이거래. 다디 대화네 바디 아무것도 동해디 동해디 이제 주디 바방 디바스나 아니 가르스는 대화네 바디 용구를 봐. 동해디 규마바나 동해디 기미쳐 용구를 봐. 그 어디에서는 드네 탑자세디 고텐디 이제 아니 매니 때부터 차와세디 에 고텐디 탑자 토바지와라 가르스 맨디 가르스 맨다부디 달람데디 제사 아디는 남바기다 나중 주치디다바디 덴바시군에 지우고야 돼.
남바.
덴바시군에. 덴바시 디나 포안 주베리마다 포안 도베리마 차디나 주제. 포안 고주디 디나 주에 포안을 주주디 디나 주제.
디나서 남바 간다로 괜찮을 수 있어요.
내가 나와있네. 중 주치 저 디트군에 지우고야 돼. 그래서는 고아주베 주디 고아주레비 유박한가 디나리아리 고아주베 주레비 유박한가 디나리 차이니.
So just as the first two of the Four Truths describe and teach how to understand the process by which samsara is set in motion, the latter two truths of cessation and the path describe the process for reversing that process, for ending the process by which samsara is set in motion. Dolpa means to turn it back, to end it. So, altogether, this subject matter of the Four Truths is perhaps the most fundamental doctrine in the entire Buddhist religious tradition, in that it addresses the fundamental error or the fundamental problem, and it also teaches the method and the result that can be achieved by applying the method to remove that problem. And there is a famous verse which gives an analogy for how to think of the Four Noble Truths. Describes them, each of them with a noun that describes their nature, or what's most significant about them to understand, and then also what is the appropriate understanding, or what is the way to relate to those four conditions. So the truth of suffering is like a disease or an illness or a malady, and the first thing to do about a disease is to diagnose it, for a physician to investigate, well, what is the nature of the discomfort or physical problem that a person is experiencing. And so like that, the supreme physician of the Buddha diagnoses the fundamental condition of all samsaric beings as to be suffering the illness of samsaric suffering. And that is something which is to be known, that needs to be known, the future participle, that which is an object that needs to be learned, understood, or known. And then after you diagnose the illness, then in order properly to understand the illness so that you can remove it, it's necessary to know, well, what is the cause of that illness? What is the source of that illness? And in order to cure that illness, once you identify its source, then that is the main quality that you need to eliminate if you want to cure the person's disease. So the second noble truth represents identifying the cause of one's samsaric suffering, this illness of samsaric suffering. And then once the cause of it has been identified, then the third noble truth is to say, well, what is the goal? The goal is to cure that illness so that you can attain a state of ease. Deorineva is a phrase which means to abide in a state of ease. So that, in the case of an illness, it would be a state of health. In the case of samsara, it refers to the ultimate ease of nirvana. And so that ultimate state of ease is the goal to be attained. What we seek to attain is the state of having been cured of our illness. And then the fourth truth, the truth of the path, is the means by which that state of ease can be attained through eliminating the cause of the illness. And so then that is described in the process of the analogy of the illness is the truth of the path corresponds to the necessity to follow the regimen of whether it's to take medicine or to follow whatever the doctor's prescription is to correct the condition of suffering. So man is the medicine, and that it's not enough to have the medicine has to be applied. Damparcha means one has to resort to the medicine. One has to engage in some active process to benefit from the medicine's curative power.
That is just that. Many teachers are not that. The men down to net netting to do the netting to choose netting that netty is Tunisia, but I say, did the Jibari. Tunisia, but I say, net shepherd chassis. Netty to net a child. The netty, any seven, netty, netty, use of Tassin. Netty to carry it, again, carry it, and the church after that. And Kunjuti shepherd. That to me without the Kunjusi, but leg teacher. That is the Pang, we are east. Neshe, Jason, Netty, Gaya, which you could that. To get a Kunjumi Pang, preacher. She just just. That is to get a Kunjumi Pang bed. The what did I? Said Jampa. Oden said the net of just the one never did. Nay, during the one near Yati, so then did the shop. It took jetty. That the one never did 3 hours to carry the mating region. Made it on Delicha. That is
So there is a direct connection between the analogy of an illness when it's thought of in the terms that were described, which is to say, we have to know, we have to recognize, we have to identify that we are in a state of malaise, that we have some illness that we are suffering from. So just in just the same way, the first truth, the truth of suffering, is described and was taught in the original teaching of the Four Noble Truths. It was taught in 3 sort of rehearsals. The first one was to present the essential nature of each of the Four Noble Truths, and then the second one was to describe what is the proper perspective to take towards those truths. And the perspective to take towards the truth of suffering is it is that which needs to be known, that which needs to be understood. So similarly, the role of the doctor is if we know we're sick, but we don't know what sickness we have. So the role of the doctor is to inform us of what we are suffering from. And then secondly, in order to cure that illness, we have to identify not just what we're suffering from, but what's the cause of that suffering, what's producing that suffering. The illnesses are cured by eliminating the source or cause of that suffering, and the same way samsara's suffering is ended by removing the causes of that suffering, which are the truths of origination are identified as a combination of karma and mental afflictions, of which mental afflictions are the primary cause. So then the perspective that we need to take towards the cause of that illness is that we must eliminate it, it must be abandoned, just as the cause of the suffering must be removed in order to restore health. The causes of samsaric suffering must be abandoned by eliminating essentially the mental afflictions. Then the goal is that if we do eliminate those causes, then in fact we can reach the point where we can be restored to a state of ease, health, and that health, that is a metaphor for the state of nirvana or freedom from samsara, permanent, irreversible freedom from samsaric suffering. And that is our goal. That is the thing that which we have to make happen, which is what we want to attain for ourselves. And that is possible, and that is what we should seek. And then furthermore, if we want to actually restore our health in the sense of an ordinary illness, or if we want to attain that ultimate goal of nirvana, we have to engage in a process, a curative process that will enable us to reach that goal of ease. And that's usually the path. And so the path is that which needs to be resorted to, or which needs to, in the case of the Four Noble Truths, it needs to be meditated on or cultivated, just as one has to follow a regimen of applying medicine in order to cure ordinary disease.
No, that didn't. That is a delicious one. And Penjigile, Narandubi, Penjigileti, Jogi, Pembari.
Yes.
Anami Punguti, Tenjobi, Mundi, Tadami, Punguti, and Gaveleji to Pembari. That eating to something Nathan Jibuti, the Nathan Damina Yuya, these Zoji less in each other. And then Gaveleji, Pung Shabe, Pungu, Nami, Pungu, the things. And it can be Mambo Yuya. And it would jig there. It's so jig less here. Kuti Metinji, Leti can come to Mari. These are the Penjigiles, Kujigiles at the Penjigiles at the Tambules at Dubi. Let the Penji and that Penjigiles at the Me Pungu, Nami Pungu, room to chess, room to chess. That is against Hana. I mean, do you let survey? Telling me by a matter, game Matana. That against Han, me, you did it. Two to check, to the room, pending let study. That do you less at somebody that did. Now the finish of a pungu to that, never do it to us. That is. Nyan to room to check the should never get younger. That didn't paint to jubilate the silly 7 years and do it getting able. Don't do it. Silly silver.
So that way,
I'm putting a painting years ago. Then silver sweater. And Sivatan and Bani said, didn't you research? Sivatan and Bani to do something, Nami, Getting able to do a chicken. Tamputi do a chicken. Never sharp and should do jeopardy. That day, Juba never chair my college at young. Then she died Cherina. Namiti doing ever never. Pinching later. That name, pinching later that doing ever cherry. Or that is pinching less and Jesus, need to pending later sunny near to Nami Pumuti, doing a bummy. Then she got up to Sabi Tub Shabina, Sabi Kilurate Jebreba. That is true that you my devil cooking my bar. But that under the pending glass at the Nami Blue of J. In the sugar at the Shingatigan and Saint Tub Shabba, that should have truly less over to see a chest and you could take it to tell the bar. He do less in it. That you do less in it, didn't you or to the Nami here.
So, going back to the subject of karma that we were addressing yesterday, there are many points about the nature of karma that can and need and are very useful to understand. So, one important starting point for the discussion, we can say, is that here we sit as human beings with the opportunity to be able to benefit from hearing the Dharma and hopefully practicing the Dharma. Then that condition that we currently enjoy is something that was, and then there's the word penjava. Penjava means that it is something that is projected, and something that is, that karma, a certain aspect of karma has the ability to bring about, project in the sense of bring about. And so that's called penjegile. Penjegile is a particular type of karma that has the ability to bring about a particular form of rebirth. So not all karma has that quality to it. It has to have a certain potency to it in order to have that quality. Then generally, penjegile is thought of as is a phrase used to describe karma at the time that you accomplish the act initially. So in the case of our present human life, it would be something that was done in a former life. At the time that we accumulated the particular virtue that served as the cause for us to be reborn in this life as a human being. So when that particular virtuous act was carried out, when we performed it, when we completed that act, and remember we said in the subsequent moment following that, we were talking about the fact that it enters the quality of becoming, it has the potential to bring about some result. So that potential for that act to produce a particular, in this case a human, favorable rebirth, is at that time, it only has the capacity to produce that rebirth. It remains in that dormant state. It's not subject to deterioration, but it won't necessarily produce that future human rebirth. Other conditions have to come about in order for that seed, if you like, to actually ripen into the current human life that we enjoy. So typically, what happens if we think of it just from one life to the next, perhaps in the same lifetime that you accumulated that deed, which is called a form of projecting karma, then towards the end of your life, depending on your mind, in particular, the two, if you know the limbs of dependent or 12 limbs of dependent ordination, I think it's 8th and 9th limb, I think it's limbs of craving and the limbs of grasping. Those two mental qualities, those two mental afflictions, in fact, have play the role of stimulating or awakening, or what do you say, to causing a seed to sprout, to become activated. And so at that point, the particular karma that had the potential to produce a human life is then now going to actually produce that human life. So it's part of the continuum related to the initial deed, which became a potential that had the capacity to produce a rebirth, and then when the right circumstances come about, then that seed is made to ripen, and then after you pass away from that life, then it ripens in the sense that it becomes the force that produces rebirth in your current human life, for example. So there are several points to understand about that process. Is even though when you commit a particular karmic act, that can take on the characteristic that causes it to be recognized, or to take on the quality of having the potential ability to produce a particular rebirth, there's no certainty, in fact, that it will produce a particular rebirth. In order for it to do so, it has to be stimulated, it has to be activated at some later time, especially if we're talking about karma in the sense of producing a particular kind of rebirth. So karma, in this case, one virtuous act, then went through that process and culminated or ripened into human birth that we currently experience, and that is due only and entirely by a virtuous act. There's nothing non-virtuous about the cause that produced our human existence. Now, once we have a human existence, though, there are many experiences that we might undergo that are not pleasant. But those incidental experiences that we have are not due to that projecting karma. They're due to some other karma.
아니 genshi cheni nami kumbuti rum nuguya chayi chasan penjigi lesaniya ni daya yore di sata duchi le sunati duchi le sete je sunati di sunati nyawa ni nyawa di digi nyawa penjigi tani pinjig le tile su tani tini duchig le sigun ha kunami duchido cheba tili tini duchig le siri di kejing yubala ani nga sunu kibirwa ta duchig le sini ta ku le tili nami kebuti ta kejing yubala nungu yarwa ta pinjig le sini tani
So, using that model for describing how karma is first accumulated, takes on the capacity or potential to produce a particular rebirth. In this case, we were talking about a virtue, and then at a later point is by our own mental afflictions, samsaric mental afflictions, not necessarily, some kind of craving and grasping, needs to activate that. And then when it activates it, if it's at the time just prior to your death, then it's causing that what was originally called a projecting karma to become a producing karma. When it becomes a producing karma, then it is on the verge of actually ripening in the sense of producing a particular rebirth. So there is a span of time in between. And same thing is true for non-virtuous deeds. In the case of non-virtuous deeds, if we accumulate a projecting karma that might cause us to, that has potential to cause us to be reborn in the hells, for instance. So we carry that, whether it was in this life or another life or many previous lifetimes. That potential exists within us. So then it's important, and the fact that it's possible to prevent that projecting karma from becoming a karma that it becomes a producing karma. And that's what we describe as the activity of so-called purifying that bad deed. Purifying the bad deed means rendering it sort of inactive in the sense of ensuring that it will not generate or cause us to be reborn in the lower realms, for instance. So that's how the practice of confession and purification, that's what its purpose is, to try to ensure that those karmas that are in a state of being projecting karmas, negative projecting karmas for unfavorable rebirths, that we can nullify them in the sense of stop them from reaching the point where they will become producing forms of producing karma, at which time it's too late, and they're at the point where they're going to generate the lower realms birth. So we have some grace period, so to speak.
That didn't see Sebas, Sebas, Jita, Chapa, then the lady sits and lady starts Hanishima, lady Namiti, to give separate, pending a soon to separate, separate, in a soon to printing, lady certainly, the Akongate, then Lamba City, separate chip, Lamba chip, Nani Shindo, Shindo, Juji, Shindo, not Dina, Nicolas. Then the other Yarba, Juji, Shindo, and Deska. Then the embassy that could or did it. Seventy chili paid in Nami did the children just a delay into code Lambas, my ship goes. Silver drinking the child.
You got chocolate and sugar.
And you should that was the Lambas means
So, if we introduce the elements of the doctrine of the 12 limbs of dependent origination, they're very helpful also to clarify or to help us understand how this process of karmic ripening occurs. So there are two limbs that are often associated with the latter part of our life, the stage prior to our death, at which our thoughts, especially our attachment, performs the function of activating and selecting, if you like, the particular karma that will produce the next rebirth. And those two limbs are the limbs of craving and grasping. And craving and grasping are both generally forms of attachment, forms of mental fiction of desire. Craving is understood to be an initial form of attachment, and a less intense form of attachment, perhaps. At any rate, grasping is considered to be a more overt form of attachment, or a stronger form of attachment. And so one can distinguish between these two kinds of, these two limbs, which are both kinds of attachment, in that craving has serves to function, or serves to begin to turn the potential of the projected karma into, activating it, starts to stimulate it, to activate it, make it ready to ripen. And then grasping is something that ensures that, in fact, it will be the particular karma that will produce the next rebirth. And so there's a reason for identifying these two stages of attachment, and we have the visual representation of the wheel of life. The grasping limb in particular usually is depicted as picking fruit from a tree. A monkey is picking fruit from a tree, so that fruit is the karma that's going to ripen, it's going to be caused to ripen and produce the next life.
Oh, they just started Penji to Gilead. That's all she gets a dishes from Penji. Me and some Kami, some Kibuyan at the Kanan de Meles here. And the bed Nami from the Penji led the bed kitchen led the Kanan de Meles here. Kanan de Mele, the bed Penji led Cherba. The bed Hamil. Pinching led to Kanan to Meles. Sometimes Nana to Mobile, and sometimes Kibu, the Unayati, Kabuta, Derete Buta, Negi, Kerete Buta, Mikire, Unica, Temachili, Nigeria. Sometimes Kibu Yati. Creative sometimes Kangi had immigrated long chain, Kanan de Meles, Odi and Santi, Zochi electric, Zochi electric, Nami change of a detail, the white to see layer of it, the painting, the Yag layer of it, Yankan Naila so that the kitchen ledges.
So in addition to the projecting karma that is the principal cause for a particular rebirth, then within that rebirth, within that life, whether it be a higher realm rebirth or a lower realm rebirth, then there are a variety of experiences that we can undergo. In the case of a higher realm rebirth, then we have variety. Sometimes we have pleasant experiences, sometimes we have illnesses, sometimes we have misfortune, sometimes we have other kinds of difficulties. And then those aspects of our life are said to be due to what is called the completing karma. Completing karma means something, it's kind of like the one is sometimes described as like the outline of a painting, and then that's the projecting karma, and then the completing karma is like all the colors and details that are used to give the full painting all its different varieties to it. So completing karma is described as those karmic elements which are responsible for various kinds of experiences, favorable or unfavorable, that we may experience in a higher realm rebirth or even in a lower realm rebirth. There are even respites against horrible suffering in the hells, for instance, that can be attributed to some positive element of a completing karma. There's also in the literature a description which describes types of karma as being something which is completely white karma. That means virtuous in a completely virtuous, nothing unvirtuous about it. And then similarly, there's black karma, which is totally black in the sense that there's nothing about it that is anything but non-virtuous. Then there's something which is there's this canonical terminology which says there are karmas which are a mixture of black and white. Jampa means that they have some virtuous elements to them, but they also have some non-virtuous elements to them. And that doesn't mean one and the same moment can be partially virtuous and partially non-virtuous. It means that the process that's involved in doing some overall deed that may take time or that may have some process involved in it can be, you can start out with a virtuous motivation, want to do something really good, and then in the process of trying to complete it, some non-virtuous thoughts may creep into your mind and sort of taint the act and sort of add that mixture of non-virtuousness to the overall act. And so that can cause, those kinds of karmas can cause a variety of different kinds of results. And in general, those kinds of karmas are associated with experiences within the desire realm. The desire realm being one that, the desire realm includes the human rebirth, worldly gods. Certain kinds of worldly gods are also part of the desire realm. The lower realms are also part of the desire realm. But then there are other elements of samsara which are beyond the desire realm. But mixed karma is mostly associated with the desire. White and black mixed karma is mostly produces results in the desire realm.
Nations, Neti to make Tawarka, Neti point the Tinet to Mamma Uriaba, what is it? Nations, Neti person to Uriaba, what is it? Sajegi, Yetita, Sebas, and the chat. Seba. Do you number do you to make the way in the chest? When a nation is
the nation the Dumel Jubilee.
Lady could to make you set out Tilba. Lady person
So, just as the Noble Truth of Suffering has 4 aspects, so too does the truth of origination. So origination is the name of one of the 4 aspects of the second Noble Truth. Usually the first aspect, if you were going to enumerate the 4, is the aspect that is known as cause. It's got Gyu in Sanskrit, Hetu. So Hetu means main cause of something. So then the kind of formal, philosophical, precise description of the truth of origination in terms of its aspect of being cause is Sosokyo means non-Arya. A non-Arya means someone who has not achieved the transcendent path and therefore is wholly and completely under the influence of all the mental afflictions. So that kind of person, in his or her mind, there exists both impure or contaminated karma. Contaminated karma means samsaric karma that can contribute to continued samsaric existence. And in connection with that contaminated karma, then there's also craving. Those two elements together, craving being another term for attachment or desire for samsara, some aspect of samsara. Then those two qualities within the mind of a non-Arya, those represent the causal aspect of the truth of origination, because they are the root. Just so in the Tibetan, it just uses the word root. We can understand it to mean root cause. The root of suffering. That means the principal cause for suffering. Just as, and now how we're using the word illness again, as to say that the nature of an illness is something that is responsible for pain. And so karma, that impure karma and attachment are the root cause of some form of suffering or discomfort, just as an illness is the source or cause of experiencing the pain associated with illness.
That's nya tingi chujins. Ani kunjung bina ba indi. Ni tunge yang tu jeba chibichi. Ani je gimi ba shinsi tu je siati ti mana tu kare. Nimbu siati ba. Nimbu siati ba. Todo chike.
Not that time.
Chike ni ya tu son ti.
Dressing ba.
Dancing ba ti.
Pearl dressing.
Nimbu ti chik tu chani ya chik tu mambu chung tu ba. What do you search it? Ko tunge kunjung se tunge kunjung se tunge kunjung che se ati tunge yang tu ke se ko ti ti na chi ke ti yang chi ma chi ke ngu da tunge yang ti ta de ngi ba tu de ti Mutune,
so then we take the same two elements that were described, right? Contaminated karma and attachment or craving in the mind of an ordinary samsaric being, a non-Arya. They also constitute the second aspect of the Noble Truth of Origination, which is the term origination. And the term, if you use the word term origination, it doesn't have any, what should I say, so in the original Sanskrit term and the Tibetan term, there's something that means to arise or originate. There's also a prefix to it. In Sanskrit, it's sam udaya. In Tibet, it's gun jungwa. So that prefix carries a certain sense to it that is being addressed as the significance of this second aspect that in English we typically say is origination. And so that sam prefix or the gun prefix means that those same qualities of contaminated karma and attachment not only have the capacity to be the causes of suffering, they produce suffering in a way that it is repetitive. It is ongoing. It is then yang means again and again. So then the analogy or the example for it is then as a boil on your skin produces continuous pain.
야티 딩이 주제 라기 인디스 동네 다 붙여지지. 아다티 케네 수스리시스 케네 수스리스 제가 동네
Then the third aspect is, and I don't know, probably could be translated by different people using different English words. And here I refer to it as source. The Sanskrit, the rabge in Tibetan, rabge. Then again, ge is the verb which means to arise or to come into being, gewa. Rabge is the prabhava, is the prefix pra, and that is understood to mean something that not only arises, but arises in an intense way. So the third aspect of truth ordination is that those qualities are a source of intense suffering. That the suffering is not mild. That samsara suffering is deep and strong and profound. And then the example for that is like the sharp pains in the kidneys, like the stone. If you have kidney stones, that pain is supposed to be hard to bear.
다 경기 나봐 인데시아 때다지 세버들 숨 쉬어야 돼. 치시 있어야지. 치레시 가서야지. 그래 직시 있어야지. 우리 시시 숨. 직시 있을 말하는 치시 있을 때 치레시
양주
세버지야 봐. 시간 지금도 잠깐 세배치기를 받들 시시시게 직시시들 드네디 동네 풍부들아 제부도 두스전 직시치기게 직시시 얘네 시시시들 잠깐 치만이 좀 자니게 시바 양실을 세베 제르바 양실을 세베 시시
우리 더베스와 지베스와
제시 직시 아니 치시르바
시베스와체, 더베스와체, 아니 지베스와체. 무슨 좋아?
말이 때문에 치시제
치와 치두가
세바치제 치시제 근데 알거야 대시 대시 세바숨 되게 대시제 문제들이 세바 치시제가 이만 사태들이 인터넷 뒤만 세바
문득 세바서 왔다. 대화 서로한테.
문제를 세바서가 다시 문제를 세바
양조원진 좋아 양조원진. 아니 양식을 세웠더니 등에 뒤집게 세웠어.
치시 세지 어디 치매 치레 치 풍부를 세바 디시시 이두가 단디리 쇼티
시베세바 더베세
이 메드바라
이치베세 이드메와
어디지 대시제 지시제 시시순 누가 레베시바 지시시제
시베세
이 시시순 다 시시시제 양쪽이네 치매 칠레티 풍부의 세베세바 세베세바 디온디 인시도 결혼의 인시도가 다시시세티 다시시 취지 시제로 땡기 넘버 인데 두 군주라기 땡이가 땡기 넘버 시시티샤 시시티 땡기 넘버 인디 인지도 너니 칩을 지어야 치지 알아 인지 칩을 지어야 봐 저한테들이 시시세티 가르치는 치미 칠레티 칠레티 풍불러시의 세바티 다들이 시베세바스 디비쿠 정말 연동치게 다 풍불러 세베세바티게 요새 치매 풍부티 링기야래
So then we're talking about now the last of the four aspects of truth coordination, which is called in Tibetan Gyen. Gyen is a term that often is translated as a condition, right? A condition. And here I decided to call it a contributing factor. But anyway, again, it's some kind of causal element. And so then mental fictions serve as a contributing factor or a condition for samsaric existence in a specific way. And the specific way is understood in relation to the way the term craving, which is a general word for this different kind of desire, that there are three kinds of craving that are identified, that we can be subject to. One of them is called Dovesewa. Dovesewa means craving for the craving of desire, you can say, maybe interpret that Dovesewa. And that's craving is craving for pleasurable experiences. That is what we usually think of it as attachment. Then there's another kind of craving, which is not what we normally think of as craving, which is the craving of extinction or non-existence. And that type of craving is the craving that we have when we experience pain. When we experience something unpleasant, then we develop a kind of craving, a desire to be rid of it. We're not able to tolerate pain, so we want to free ourselves of it. Then that's a form of desire, one kind of craving. Then the third kind of craving is the craving for existence, sibe-seva. And that existence means samsaric, continued samsaric existence. And so in this fourth fourth aspect of the truth of origination, that how the mental afflictions in particular serve as a condition or contributing factor for the continuation of samsaric condition, is that when we are particularly at the end of our lives, when we are facing death, and we are in our mind developing the prospect that our lives are going to end, that we're going to cease to exist. So then we have the kind of attachment, which is we don't want our existence to cease. So we want our five skandhas, our samsaric being, not to come to an end. We want it to continue. And that kind of craving is the craving for continued existence. So that particular form of craving among the three is the one that is identified especially as the fourth aspect of truth origination.
Then dan döses야디 이 가르치는 대통령이 세가들 döses야. 단 직세서는 이 예두명을 제대로 전두로 지키기로 대 차발이. 때는 직세서야. 그러나 이 예두명을 지체인데 제가 전두로 지키기로 그는 직세서야. 이 야, 얘도 명화한테 전두로 이렇게 그 지도야 가르쳐줘야 돼. 이것도 명화한테 찾아줘야 돼. 그때는 다 전두로 때는 대화기 아니 때는 처리야. 이 얘도 명화한테 대화한테 찾니. 전두로 뒤에 때는 처리야.
So, as was mentioned, the other two kinds of craving. And so, it's usually, the word actually, döme sewa. Döme means desire. So it sounds like saying the craving of desire. But the word desire, it refers not only to the mental state of desiring something, it also is used for the object. So the sense objects are also referred to as the objects of desire. So the craving of desire, it really means the craving for pleasurable objects, pleasurable experiences. So those things, those attractive objects that we want to experience, that we aren't currently experiencing, those can trigger in us a kind of craving of wanting to obtain them. Then that's one kind of attachment, the attachment of craving for pleasure, craving for the objects of desire. Then the second is the exact opposite of that, which is just as we are drawn to pleasurable objects, we are, repulsed by, or we have a sense of aversion for unpleasant experiences. And when we are enduring something unpleasant or painful, there is the inclination within us to be free, to be rid of that unpleasantness. And that desire to be rid of that unpleasantness is described as the craving for extinction, or vibhava, means non-existence, means jigbe seva, is the craving to be able to become free of pain. These are kind of three sort of modes of desire.
Jiden chugena yaraba tenaka metenamikawa.
Yes.
Ni data medi, data medi. Ni kata meka serva jiden chugesa. Tanti manati neta kewala ka tumela mekawa sasi jiden chugena.
So,
Tadi chugena ni
beneath
tumela metevelo charva tumete tendu loti
jigbe
jibesela di tapo jiden chugena jiden tuye. 권용적으로 대적이야 대팀만체라 디 인생 당용적으로 당용적이야 당용내버렸지.
So, a useful way to really appreciate those two kinds of craving is that they are implicit in the doctrine of the 8 worldly aims. So among the 8 worldly aims, 2 of them are pleasure and pain. And pleasure and pain are not inherently worldly aims, but when we include them among the 8 worldly aims, it means we have an inordinate predilection for experiencing pleasure, and we have an equivalent aversion for experiencing pain, or we want to avoid pain. And we have an emotional response, a very intense emotional response to want to escape from pain. So those two qualities are representative of those two kinds of craving for pleasure and craving for the extinction of pain. And the real purpose of those 8 worldly, or sort of the instruction that applies to the 8 worldly dharmas is the appropriate then attitude that we should cultivate toward them is equanimity, to be unmoved by, to not be overly drawn to seek pleasure, nor overly upset when we experience something unpleasant, to be able to remain even-minded. The fact that we lack that quality means that we are subject to those two kinds of those two kinds of craving that are part of the truth of origination.
단지 동해기 남바시 삼인 동해 시에부터 중하고 다 군주가 남바시부터 시 삼인도 군주 공주가 놓기야. 그 군주 승계티 두자리 가르스니 란데 동해기 주지기야리 아니 디마세 동해 군 야네 양주께서 지기야리 दिने ते तुम्हें काबू के बच्ची है दिन मासे यंसी छिमला छे बच्ची की रही सेंटीले दिन में पर यंसी छिमल था छिमे दुनिया छमरा जामपा छिमला छे बच्ची था दिने दिन सामी दिन तक मुझे बोंदे रोकी गया.
So then we shouldn't think of these 4 aspects of truth of origination just in the abstract. Rather, we should reflect upon them in how we are subject to them in the ways that were described. So we are likely, most of us, non-Aryas, we possess contaminated karma, and then we have, in terms of the main cause for future rebirth is attachment, some form of attachment, craving in general. So, in the first aspect doesn't limit it to the craving for future existence, right? So then, saying general craving and contaminated karma, those are the root cause of our samsara, ongoing samsaric suffering. Then, not only is the root cause, they are the cause which brings about, which causes that condition to originate repeatedly, again and again. So to reflect on those entities in that way, they have that potential, they have that disadvantage to them. Then thirdly, they don't just bring us, some mild kind of discomfort. They produce the intense unsatisfactoriness of samsara. And then in particular, the kind of craving that we have at the end of our life, where we don't want our samsaric existence to end, ensures that it won't end. And then it will, in fact, bring about our having to take birth. It joins us to our next life. So in that sense, it's a pernicious kind of condition that we are subject to or vulnerable to at the end of our lives. So we should reflect on, in fact, how we are exemplars of these qualities. And then we should develop towards them the attitude, I need to abandon this aspect of my being. I need to get rid of the fact that I am subject to and controlled by these qualities.
kunju tenpas che ta kunju tenpati panya ba tati panya te ku tati 빵도 그렇게 되는데 그 빵에 빵바지 뒤주지 그 빵야지 제와지 연하면은 무슨 생각이 됐다 그 이미 친구들이 이미 친구들 견도 불러지거든요. 다 제약의 지지.
맞어.
제철없지.
맞어.
제를 뒤르지 연하면 생각을 봐.
맞아.
아 뒤르지 삼기 뒤에 고파싱에 뒤로 파 되지. 특히 연하면 삼삼 놓치기게 뒤에서 고대에 되지. 군중들이 이미 삼인도 군중 공중으로 기를 봐. 뒤에 이제 잡았더니 뒤 고배고 버스에 지연하면은 이 빵같이 지연하면은 빵도 그렇게 이제 지금 빵같이 면 고배 찾으면은 다 아니 또 전에 빵도 깨내야 그 때문에 제가 고배 탐랑지 맨 제가 다시 이제 아니 고바 세야지 동행 고바 세야지 지금 또 지키게 근데 대신에 토자 동행의 저 고바지 토지 유연하면 대중생들이 고대디 인구가 딴 고대디 아니 이제 잡았더니 제철없지 딴 고대디 여가 있는 딜탁가리 토부도 동행 고백 고바지 이런 탑시 가르를 때는 인구도 세이드더니 남대디 인구야 다시 디제수 남시합을 봐. 다제서 대내 시자 내니 시자 내이 준의 방자가 대내 독자세지 대내 디고 대디가 내 디렉트네 제래 고급지에 담는다. 다시 대내 독자스 내니 temple charts 그거 that is that in
so there's a logic, there is a significant relationship sequentially to the four truths. Suffering is something we have to recognize first. We have to, it must be known. Once we understand it to be something undesirable, then the question arises, how does it come about? Does it come about at random? Is it without a cause? Or is there any way to determine what produces this condition? And that leads you to investigate what its source might be, what its causes might be. That leads you to the determination of the second noble truth, the truth of origination. When you determine that suffering is caused by karma and mental afflictions, and then you recognize that they are not, what should I say, they are not conditions that we have that we should be indifferent to. Rather, we should think of them as harmful to us, and something that we therefore must, if we want to be free of our suffering, we must get rid of its cause. So we develop the desire to be free of the causes of suffering. Then the question arises, is that a possibility? Is it possible, in fact, to abandon the mental afflictions and to free ourselves of the power of the potential of karma to bring about rebirth? And so that question, that impulse to find out if it's possible to free yourself from suffering, leads you to investigate whether there is such a thing as the cessation or the termination or a state in which one is no longer subject to suffering or its causes. And that leads you to the third noble truth of cessation. So if we gain with certainty an understanding that there is such a thing as nirvana, in fact it exists, and secondly that it's possible to attain it, you yourself can attain that cessation, then that's hugely important in motivating you to seek it. So then once you determine that it is possible and that cessation is not a temporary condition but a complete cessation, then you want to determine what is the best, most effective means of attaining that, and then that leads you to the final truth of the path.
Panja Kunda Pambe, Senji Kuku. Deep go dainty to the Ganga, Pambe, to make under Melusria, but she was Gesha and Mary. To marry Gina to make the invasion to Chulu Grachiava. Then, Genji said to the Gorku chair. Genji said, Chunju Gorku
Thank you.
Chambu the Chun says, the Bashi Pangua. Just a tango, said the Panja Chick of China. And Genji Kunda said, Chabina. Genji Kunda Pamba said, that you could turn to the Toby.
Yes.
Tibetan turn. Well, that day, that day, Jim went to Mundu out of the day. Pangati, we are. That's
Jolam
oh, Jolam because of the Mundu at Pena, Jolam Zemoto, you do. Hungry on the road, get a jibati, Jibatan to race, didn't it? Hungry on the get a jibatan to say, hungry on the get a jibati. Tangi research or passage. Tangi so tango, so Tami passage, what did you say to get? The Jonan Jampa, Sava, Churches, Tatinia, Mugua, she did something about the Mugua here to Mugua, the Bash in the Pangria, comes to Pang said today. Pang said, Mugua, Pang said, not to do at the dinner time, not to do an ever, Mugua, Pang's here. The Sabi the Pang, and another team to Nair Gina, Nantini, Nair the Chambuti Chun, which and the Chun, the Papa Jenny, Chun, the never Chuba. Oh, that would be dinner, she cherry. To me, Tabutus. Midasi, the community. Tomba said, the Panja Barbici. Panja Batina, Tomba said. The Panja Tamuti. Thank you. Oh, that 토랑 그스파야 통바 군주 숨세제 어다디서 다디리 당고 뭐가시도 가르치고 되시나 안 주셔야지나 내럽지나 내디 목에 차지라 고바세지 답변이 군주는 답이 방지 명문과 라바 방비 차세지 근데 참무스 딘도스 조르가 내럽지는 매때니 내 아버지냐라 고두가 내 아버지 냐라 고두가 내 중도가 다 중에 뒤에야 야매 그렇게 틀리 때니 아니 중에 내가 소르가 어디 모든세야 딘다고 지레세
So, speaking generally, in an overall way about the truth of cessation, that the cessation is a term that means that elements of the mental afflictions are terminated, are permanently and irreversibly terminated. However, it's not something that is attained all at once. When you don't, you're not able to, by means of the path, you're not able to attain a realization, a transcendent realization, direct realization of reality, and that initial realization doesn't have the ability to, in one blow, so to speak, eliminate all of the seeds of all of the mental afflictions, so will wipe them away. That's not the way it works. So there is a whole kind of explanation about the nature of the mental affliction. So yesterday was described that there are root mental afflictions, 6 root mental afflictions. Sometimes the views are differentiated into 5 types of, altogether 10 root mental afflictions. And then those mental afflictions are defined in relation to each of the Four Noble Truths. So there is a desire in relation to truth of suffering, desire in relation to origination. And, so there's a reason for that, that each of the mental afflictions has a certain kind of aspect to it. Some of them are related to the desire realm, some of them are related to the form realm, some of them are related to the formless realm. And in order to completely eliminate them, all the aspects of the mental afflictions have to be removed. But they cannot all be removed at one and the same time. So similarly with an illness, you have a serious illness or a chronic illness, and then typically when you start to take the medicine that will mitigate that illness or start the process of curing it, whatever the symptoms that the illness has can become, the more serious or the more painful, the more pronounced elements of the illness begin to dissipate slowly. But still there may be vestiges of the illness. You have to continue to take the medicine over a prolonged period of time, and then eventually, hopefully, the illness can be completely eliminated. So the cessations are the same way. Among the cessations, there are one portion of the cessations are called untak. Untak means that they are caused by, they are a direct result of our erroneous thinking, and so they are the lighter form of the mental afflictions, in the sense that when you first achieve the path of seeing and you achieve direct realization of emptiness, in the case of Mahayana view and the Mahayana path, then all of the mental afflictions that can be generated by your own misunderstanding about the nature of reality are removed. Those are eliminated. But those are really the lightest forms of the mental afflictions. And all what remains are the elements of the mental afflictions that are more deeply ingrained and are more habitual and do not require any particular form of thought to be triggered. They just occur sort of spontaneously in your experience. And so those have to be eliminated in a more gradual way on what's called the path of meditation. And so typically they're from the desire realm to the form realm and the formless realm. And they're identified as having different gradations. So there's the stronger form of the innate mental afflictions, the medium strengths of the innate mental afflictions, the weaker form of the innate mental afflictions. And then each one of those can further be subdivided into great of the great, medium of the great, and lesser of the great. So you get 9 different gradations of the innate mental afflictions. So in the case of, say, believing in things to be self-existent, there can be a natural or an innate form of that belief. That you just, without thinking, you instinctively develop that belief, that mistaken mental affliction. So those are the ones that form of mental afflictions are harder to destroy and have to be done by meditating on the path over time. Then there are many other elements about the path that are described. There's something called kind of the most pronounced form of mental. So there's the mental afflictions are called objects to be abandoned. So there are the objects that are abandoned by the path of seeing, and those are called Jampa. So that means the forms of the mental afflictions that are eliminated when you perceive reality directly for the first time. Then all the remaining mental afflictions are called Jampa. That means they are the objects that are abandoned, or remain to be abandoned by the path of meditation. So among the mental afflictions that are abandoned by the path of seeing, then Tongpang, they're called Tongpang, means abandoned by seeing, Bunjor Sum. So there are 3 very important forms of mental afflictions that are called Bunjor. Bunjor is a word for a mental affliction. It's not literally the word for mental afflictions. It means some kind of like bond, some kind of thing which is binds you. Bunjor. Then those are kaisa, jipsok dawa, then so those are belief in a real self, right? Belief in a real self, doubt, the afflicted form of doubt. Is there really a path? Is there really a cessation? That kind of doubt, which is a mental affliction. Right? And then the belief that certain kinds of behavior are truly promoting liberation when they aren't. So dedicating yourself to certain kinds of lifestyle or certain kinds of behavior, mistakenly thinking that they are spiritually valuable when they're not. They're irrelevant. They're a waste of time. Those 3 mental afflictions are then among the mental afflictions the most obstructive that prevent you from achieving the path of seeing. So they are identified by name as the 3 kinds of bonds, 3 kinds of binding mental afflictions. Then there's a whole other discussion about when you abandon the mental afflictions, you're not abandoning the manifest form of the mental afflictions. You're abandoning the seeds of the mental afflictions, the very potential, what's the underlying condition that can trigger the mental afflictions. You're trying to destroy that. But prior to attaining the path of seeing, when you begin the process of destroying the seeds of the mental affliction, you're still, to a greater or lesser degree, subject to the active or manifest form of the mental afflictions. When means when you become angry, then the anger becomes manifest or active. But during the path of preparation, prior to achieving the path of seeing, then you develop spiritual powers, spiritual qualities, which have the ability to suppress the mental afflictions and abandon them by preventing them from becoming active. And there's a whole description of that So among the levels of the path of preparation, then in the Abhisamayana, they talk about the tendency to think of objects as self-existent, the tendency to think of mental states as real, and so there are 4 levels of mistaken forms of the belief that things are real, truly existent. And those gradually are suppressed as you make progress on the path of preparation. So, and then they have their own names: heat, the peak, and then if you reach the peak, which is the second level of the path of seeing, for instance, it's said that you are no longer be subject to having your roots of virtue destroyed by wrong view. It means wrong view will never be able to gain control of your mind. Wrong view being one of the worst elements of one of the 5 views is wrong view. And that has the ability to destroy your stock of merit and virtue. It can just cut them or destroy them. Once you reach to the level of the peak, then you're invulnerable to having the wrong view cause you to become manifest, and therefore to subject you to develop the kind of karma that would bring an unfavorable rebirth. So it's kind of like a stage where your progress is guaranteed to continue on an upward path.
That's Lunda Ripalateni, Chair to Rotan in Jimshap, Kundas here. Change is setting around to Jotama Mebane Nanji Setiari. Lunda Ripalateni, Chair to Rotan in Jimshap. Or did it Hangy Seti? Judela Matiba. Ripana Matuba, ni Rashi to get disease, Zinatilla, and Hages here. That today only, and then Lunda, Ribala, Tenny, the Ribati, or the day the Tenny, Rashi to Bazin, Tenitilla, Bundas here. The Bundas here. Pece de Budana, sugar mission never.
Buddha.
Okay, Bundavi. Around Rashi to Bandimba of Telia, Bunda the Hanging Ramana to Bandimba Telia. Hangy days, Sinja can get to the Yari. Maranja. Bunda Chadi to tell Lab of the concert. To the mission, or these and the Lunda Ripalatene, Tobe, Sat Rotabe, Rotan in Zimbabwe, Kundas here. Was it Kuntas, Rota? Could you generate then Rotan in Zimbabwe? Could it? I mean, another to tell my should be Judah, Rashid to the Simiti. Carrying my back. Rashid too much would care than Inea could Rashid to the peculiar. Taya to tell the shoes and send the garbage in the Ranju and the chatting to tell shoes. Rashid to a yaris. Carries in a moon to the cherries. Rebut in it. Rashid to Matun never ways. It is cherry. Ribatinel and Co. Rashid to Continental. Still Kundas here. Tipundati, on Lauria. Tiesata, Kundata, Shangi said it.
So, the distinction between the conceptually fabricated or contrived forms of the mental fictions and the innate forms of the mental afflictions. That's a fundamental distinction. Is important. Then the Buddha, the ones that are based on mistaken conceptions, are lighter. They're easier to abandon. They are in fact all abandoned when you initially achieve the path of seeing, whether it's Mahayana path of seeing or the Hinayana path of seeing. So they are, in order to develop a conceptually contrived or fabricated, parikalpita, I believe is the term, Buddha in Tibetan, form of mental afflictions, there must be some sort of rational but mistaken basis for forming those mental afflictions. So it could rely on some kind of scriptural authority that you either don't understand correctly or is not meant the way you're taking it, or it could be some form of reasoning that you are using to justify a particular mistaken belief, and then those types of mental afflictions are ascribed. Those are just kind of projected in your mind on the basis of mistaken conceptions. So, for example, typically those types of mental afflictions are not generally, in a manifest form, are not generally present in the ordinary, everyday person who has not taken any kind of interest in philosophy or some kind of religious doctrine. So the everyday man in the street or the uneducated person, drupte lo my gurwa, there's a phrase, drupta means some kind of philosophical tenet. Lo gurwa means the person's mind is influenced by some kind of philosophical ideas. And in this case, I mean influenced in an untoward way, in a way that is misleading. Then those are the lighter forms of mental afflictions. The deeper forms of mental afflictions are innate, but they don't require any kind of reasoning to be triggered. It's just some element of experience presents itself to you, and then because of your having possessed the seeds of the mental afflictions since beginningless time, then just the nature of the experience naturally provokes and brings forth some form of the mental afflictions, whatever they might be, whether they're views or whether they are emotional, whether they are forms of desire and hatred, for instance.
That is the Buddha said the Kenyan shower. That is Buddha should do the Ranshi never Ranshi to loyalty, Kenyan I am. Ranshi to killing Madam Ranshi never killing. Ranshi to the loyalty. Suppose Ranshi to the Kenyan the yang to W that rooms in every nature. Terrible to see to that to see rebellion to the Chinese. Rebellion. Dear Buddha. Kenyan of Jiria. Buddha. I think called Mula terrible to see Mula Martinia. Rebellion coaching.
No.
Kenyan Charba.
No.
Buddha.
So the conceptually fabricated or the conceptually created mental afflictions only are generated by a certain kind of belief system. They require some kind of reasoning, wrong though it may be. So, for instance, non-prasangikas, if we stick to the Buddhist schools, then those anyone below the prasangika school believes that things must be have some basis of objective nature in order to be valid. Otherwise, we could not assert that they exist. So that idea, that belief, represents a form of grasping at the self-existence of something, and it's based on some kind of, some kind of thought, some kind of reasoning. And so that's a contrived form of the belief that things are real or self-existent. Then animals, non-humans, all forms of life, and most humans, in fact, when they see something in their ordinary experience, then dualistic minds are such that, by definition, they appear to be self-existent. Naturally, this is the way in which that's the way in which we perceive them. But we don't think of that as being in any way errant. So it appears to be self-existent, so must be self-existent. And that represents a natural form of the mental affliction that holds things to be self-existent, not relying on any kind of logic or justification. It's just that's the way it looks, so it must be that way. So then that's a deeper form of the so-called innate form of the belief that things are self-existent, and that's harder to uproot.
Yeah, that is Gyumed danshu Gyumed land jaya to maran land shima yatsa certificate.
Okay, so we'll entertain some questions, and if there's not enough time to answer them all now, then we'll take some questions maybe in the early part of the afternoon class.
I forget one question from yesterday.
Oh.
So, for today, I wrote down, in what sense can desire be a positive quality, in terms of motivation, and also the insight that, desire does, as a motivating force. Okay, that's enough.
Okay.
You get the question.
Yes, sure. Khensur joyous. Khensur joyous yes asa. That joyous yes. That joyous na. Dan the same na. Dervas chasagar na dervas. Chidans tigarwa. Derva derva yala de yama res.
Yali.
Chesan di ani derva di naransuchi karasati. Pentoya di derva de so.
Yali.
Kideci yares.
Yeah.
Think called chiksuru nasi.
Oh, dear. That is Deva Deva Sumiari, Mundu Deva, Netame Deva, Ichi Deva Sumiari, Mundu Devati, Sanjay Yukuban, Tober Devati, Mundu Deva Silia, Oti Yagari, Tim the Chalki Mari.
I mean, that's a very, what should I say, a question that often arises, so it's good that you asked it. Not everything that we would call desire is necessarily a, quote, mental affliction form of desire. That's really the basis of it. So, to give an example, in the Buddhist psychology, there are three forms of faith that are described. I think this was mentioned previously. So one form of faith is a kind of just reverence and kind of feeling of a kind of purity of mind, almost a sense of even awe of something that is spiritually impressive, and that you just kind of makes the hair on your neck stand up when you see it. That's one kind of faith, very valid kind of faith. It's called faith of purity, and that's one kind of basic kind of faith. Another kind of faith is the faith that has a kind of, it's called belief, but it's really stronger than belief. It's a kind of feeling of conviction about some object that is spiritually significant. So faith that karma is a valid doctrine or a valid principle and based on some kind of reasoning. It's not just blindly accepted, but there are ways to establish that we ought to believe in the doctrine of karma, even though we can't verify it. So that's the second kind of faith. The faith, it's called belief literally, but it really means a kind of a faith that feels strongly, that feels conviction about certain spiritual things. The second kind of faith. Third kind of faith is the one that Rinpoche wanted to identify, which is called, in Sanskrit, Tibetan, Mumbardoba. Mumbardoba means a kind of desire, a desiring faith. And that is a faith that would apply to your question. So, for instance, we're reaching the point of the third noble truth where we're thinking about, is there such a thing as cessation? And in fact, nirvana is the cessation in which all of the mental afflictions have been eliminated. So we ask ourselves, does that exist? Is there such a thing? And is it something that is possible for one such as me to be able to attain? So if you develop the awareness that yes, there is nirvana, and yes, it is attainable for one such as myself, then that develops a kind of faith in which you are inclined to think of it as, in a positive way, as something worthy of being sought. And that is the faith of desire. So that kind of desire in which you recognize a goal as attainable and look at it as something that you would justifiably want to seek and to attain, then that's a form of desire, but not at all a mental affliction. So kind of the most basic form of faith, which is described as a kind of purity of mind, is a very important, very fundamental for any spiritual practice, and it is a quality that is that has the ability to dispel negativity, to dispel anger, to dispel hatred, by its very nature. So if you reflect on, if you look at an image of a Buddha and you bring to mind what a Buddha represents, and that inspires you with a sense of kind of reverence and a joyful reverence, then that's the first kind of faith. So, for instance, the kind of faith that's called belief. So sometimes we think of faith, and we talk about faith as, you know, the wonderful thing about faith is it's something you believe that you don't know to be true. But in Buddhism, that's really not at all the way faith is thought of. So, for instance, this very chapter of the Pramanavarttika, which is meant to establish the spiritual authority of the Buddha on the basis of reason. There is such a thing as Buddhahood. Buddhahood is attainable. The historical Buddha Shakyamuni, we can believe, we can trust that he is an example of someone who abandoned all the mental flaws and achieved the highest realization. Then based on an explanation of why that's something that we can justifiably adhere to, then that develops a kind of faith. Faith is generally a kind of positive inclination to view positively based on that kind of reasoning, and that is a second kind of faith that also it gives you some kind of conviction, right? It keeps doubt at bay.
Toji Gyumed, Togiwa, Della Gyumed, Mutu Pin Jebri. Jebati, Jebet, Jeshim, which we were in Jebet Hateni, Jebet, Jebetini, Jan Shasan in each Chavier. Yet Togiwa is in Italy, Togiwa said it, Ripati, Ripati, Sanjay, Ripamakuta. Ripotang Tan Tinit, Chai Shasman Yeti Legia. Just a Toji Chile, Togiva, Della Joe, Mutu Rings,
Della Joe,
Mutu, Togia, Rabbits, Taco, a Ripatechina, Ripasati, Nati, Ripasing it, Pashi, Ripoparana. Joke share it for me, but the down, but any
drop away at the cut you out.
But the Mambuch Day, very. In it, I mean, don't you tell it you and you could, but they will never child in the other ones. All the isn't it? Yana Lumbu Devatis, Lumbu Devatis, Metal Devatis, Lumbu to celebrate.
You talk with them.
That you
No, sir.
could pretend Masamari, the Vatan, Sansarity, Jenea, Lumbu to sit there, tell me, you know, tell me to the idea. That Cheba to sit. Togo to Suripatan, teachers in the Niddy. Teacher, because I see you did the lodging you but the tabies. The net, Ramasuna, what did the Chiba said?
So just kind of in conjunction with this notion of faith and the fact that reasoning plays a role. Right. So in Buddhism, generally, we want to say that the best kind of faith is the faith that is supported by reason, is justified faith. And so in order to gain that kind of faith that was just described, it's necessary to do some kind of investigation, some kind of analysis. Then that kind of reasoning, the activity of reasoning, there's a term in Tibetan called Dogewa. Dogewa means sometimes it means a logician. In Sanskrit, the Tarkika. Tarkika means it's a person who is always investigating things in a sort of philosophical way. So always questioning, always is this way or is this that way? So then Rinpoche quotes a verse from a tantra, and he says, and this verse says that such a person, such a, quote, logician, in that sense, a person who is always sort of inclined to, investigate and question things, that tendency to do that kind of investigation can become a flaw. So if you're always just questioning for the sake of questioning and thinking of yourself as such a good questioner, or someone who is able to question anything, and debate anybody, then that kind of person in this verse says that kind of person is far away from being able to attain the spiritual goals, the siddhis. It means that person. So it's saying that the true spiritual goals are beyond speculation. At some point, the real spiritual purpose and goals go beyond ordinary reason. One of the means is like that. Then, on the other hand, it's even possible for the person of lesser intellect, the Lumbo means a kind of dull-witted person. The Buddhism and for everybody, regardless of their intellect. So for them, if they just have trusting faith without knowing for sure that their faith is justified, it can still be a valid motivating force. And even that kind of person may achieve the goal sooner than the person who has this great intellect.
That is Shashi.
So with that, we'll end the morning.
Just a couple things about use of the outdoor toilets. We just ask that you do that as much as possible, primarily because this is an old house, old systems, water, sewer, can be put at strain when there are a number of people using the toilets inside. So we just ask that as much